All right, I've teased this for the last couple of weeks. TJ is back this week. A little spring break.
Yeah.
You feel refreshed?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. You're supposed to come back full of energy, piss and vinegar.
You know what, man? I mean, it was nice to be in Florida for a couple of days. Even coming back here. I mean, all last week,
beautiful.
And then what the fuck is the last couple of days been? 30 degrees snow on my windshield this morning.
This can't be your first spring in Michigan.
No, I know,
Come on.
it's like I can handle like if it's 60, then maybe it gets to 65. Oh, and then we have a cold. It was like 85 freaking degrees the other day.
Got my first sunburn.
It was 30, 31 this morning. It's like, what the hell, man? Like, and I get it. That's why we love this state. The weather changes constantly. But yes, it was good to get out of town for a couple days. We went down visiting some friends in Florida, took the kids down, and anytime you get a little bit of change of scenery, for even a couple of days, it's always nice.
Well,
so
I
we
know
had a good trip.
You had a chance to unplug. You've been unplugged from Twitter for about a month now,
right?
A
month and a half now, it seems. Yeah, it's been a long time.
And so you've had a chance to unplug there. You get away. Do you still follow the draft news, or are you, when you're gone, you're gone? You're leaving everything behind? Because I asked that in regards to what was the conversation? What were you hearing down in Florida, if you pay attention to it?
I mean, I certainly didn't spend much time.
Yeah.
Over the last weekend, I guess. Really this time of year, I mean, we know it's kind of slow. I mean, right now you're hearing mock draft galore. You're hearing visits. You're hearing, whatever it may be, pro days, all that good stuff. To me, I kind of unplugged a little bit. I wasn't going to dive into that. I kind of wanted to enjoy myself. And hey, we always got time, taking the morning dump to get on the news channels and see what's going on in the world, get on your favorite websites and see what you might have missed. But I still stick to, I'm trying to find new ways, or even ways what it was like, 10 years ago to get breaking news, because like for the last 10 years, John, it's been social media, and that's the quickest, even if, this time of year, right, where it's the visits or the pro days and guys giving out numbers, and even the combine, you're getting up to the second updates, on these guys and these prospects. So when I try to look for things, I'm like something happened to me. It was honestly, I think it was when they signed David Montgomery, when the Lions signed him, going back a few weeks now to free agency. But it was like 2 days later. I didn't know that. I called one of my buddies. I'm like, dude, you see the Lions? He's like, that was Monday. I called him on like a Thursday. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I feel like I'm out of the loop, man. So it's that's part of who we are now. Everybody wants, breaking news 24/7. You want to be the first to see it. And so that's where I've definitely been lacking there a little bit, but I find myself, maybe not looking at my phone as much, it's like
screen time is down.
It is still a little bit liberating, not to be, the guy that's like, oh, I gotta check what's going on. But I do have a hard time trying to stay up to date on some of breaking news around the sports world. And that's just going to be my new reality.
Well, it is. Is there any hope in the near future? Have you heard anything about accessing your Twitter account, or is this just over?
No, I don't know. They must have like Fort Knox guards that, try to, that you
apparently
have to,
not.
You have to,
somebody hacked
you
to begin with.
Right. So
you can't even hack into your own account.
You would think it would be that easy. Like, hey guys, this is me. Can you change my account back? Can I change my password? Can I access? And I sent him all these documents, right? I sent him all the emails I got about being hacked. I got, shit from 10 years ago. That's like, guys, this is me. Right. I think I even sent like a photo of like my
an
driver's
old Green Bay program,
like my driver's license. I sent like, this is me. And this was probably a month ago. And, like even 3 weeks after that, they literally sent me an email, and I think it said, sorry, we can't verify it's you. Nothing we can do. And I'm like, what do I have to do to prove it's me? But I had people, buddies on Twitter. I'm like, hey, contact their support. Send Twitter support a tweet for me saying, hey, he's locked out. This is him. This is email. And I had a bunch of people reach out to them, and even that didn't work. So I've kind of given up hope. It is frustrating. They basically told me like, nothing we can do. You can start a new one if you want. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like I've built my Twitter, man. I've built a following, that's where I've engaged with my fans. And, you know, it's hard to say goodbye to
255
followers.
255.1 thousand followers.
It's hard
except
to
you're
do.
following no one.
Well, that's because I think it was hacked, and I think they locked the account. So yeah, I don't know. Thank God nobody went on there. Whoever hacked it, thank God they didn't go on and start posting a bunch of, you know, crap that's going to get me in trouble or stupid shit. Like as soon as I found out that I was hacked, I asked like 3 of my buddies. I'm like, hey, just post a tweet, you know, that says, hey, TJ's account has been hacked. He doesn't have access. That way I could cover my ass in case something came out a day after that. I could say, no. Look, they knew that. Look, I was hacked. I got proof. Those guys, you know, those guys sent that tweet out. But
your last retweet was on 3/3 of 23.
Yep. March
6 weeks.
March 3rd. It's been a long time. And I'm sort of growing indifferent to it, where it's like, hey, if I get it back, great, you know, like, because I love interacting with fans. I obviously love busting balls on there and having a good time and talking sports and following people, obviously getting up-to-date news. But the other part of me is like, you know, starting to find other ways to get around that a little bit. And I don't know, maybe it was for the better, John. Maybe. I don't know. Do I seem like a better person to you now that I've been off social media?
Well, yeah, absolutely. You seem like a better person because in that 6, almost 7 weeks now, you've taken up a new hobby of making maple syrup, which I got to enjoy. So 100%, you are a better person and have better hobbies.
Yes.
And you're much more caring about everybody.
I would have never made syrup if I still had Twitter. Probably, right?
Problem solved. But we teased over the last couple of weeks mock drafts, and we're not going to talk about a mock draft night right now, but when you were coming out, when I was coming out, I was mocked in some of the first round drafts. If there was a 2-round mock, I was sometimes in the first, sometimes in the second, but there was a range. So I want to talk more about the range of expectations, where you were going to be drafted, how that affected you, your outlook going into the draft, and how realistic it was. My agent, who, when I vetted an agent, I wanted somebody that was going to be brutally honest with me throughout the course of my career, but especially early on. I didn't want to go into the draft with somebody that was just blowing smoke up my ass saying, yeah, you should be the first tackle off the board. I was realistic enough to know that wasn't going to happen. I was a right tackle, hadn't played some left tackle, and those that had me mocked in the first round were mocking me as a left tackle. That sounded great, but it wasn't necessarily realistic. I was mocked anywhere from late first, early second. I ended up going 37 overall. My agent was very honest with me, especially when we got towards the end of the first round, and he was on the phone with me saying, hey, there's really no team right now that has shown interest, and that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but agents do have, you know, sources inside different organizations saying, hey, we're talking about Jansen coming up. And all of those sources that he was hearing was, you got close to the end of the first round, it's going to be in the second. So I went pretty much right where I and my agent thought I was going to go at 37. Went to a team that I didn't hear much about or from in the Washington Redskins, Russ Grimm. The only time I had an interaction with them was at our pro day. He held the bag for maybe 2 or 3 drills. And then all of a sudden on draft day, Norv Turner's on the phone and says, hey, you think you'd like to be a Washington Redskin? And obviously the answer is always yes on draft day. So I went right where I thought I was, and it didn't affect me or my plans because I wasn't going to be a first-round lock. I didn't get the call that says, hey, you want to come? I don't even know where the draft was that year. It's probably still in New York. And so it wasn't like I was going to make plans to be, on site for the draft. Nobody was calling me to say, hey, we want to send a TV crew out to your location and see what's going on. But for you, I know that you were taken a little bit later in the draft, and coming out of Eastern Michigan, we talked about not going to the combine and how that affected your preparation and how that you took that in regards to motivation going out there and wanting to outperform guys that were drafted in front of you. What was the range that you were hearing from teams, that you were hearing from your agent, and where did you eventually go regarding that range of expectation?
Yeah, I think it was probably spot on. I mean, that whole process, leading up to the combine, leading up to the draft, I was much like you. I wanted an agent that was going to be honest with me. I met with 3 or 4 of them, and you always get a couple that are like, they feed you the whole, we're going to make you the highest paid O-lineman and all this shit. And we're going to, you're going to be a first rounder. It's like, okay, no, I'm not going to be a first rounder. I know that. Right. But I was hearing anything, 3 to round 6 even. So I knew that it was probably going to be one of those middle rounds. And that's exactly where I ended up going. I ended up being I think it was the 9th pick in the 4th round.
Mm-hmm.
And this was back when the draft was, God, they did. I think they did rounds 1 and 2 on a Saturday, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on Sunday. Or it even might have been 1 through 3 on Saturday.
I think it was, because I was trying to think back too. It's been so long ago.
Now round 1 gets its whole night, right?
Oh, yeah,
we know
round
that.
1 on Thursday night. Is it 2 and 3 on Friday night, or is it just 2?
I think it's 2 and 3 Friday night.
2 guys that covered the draft.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but it used. So I remember I got drafted on a Sunday. So the draft used to start. I think it was Saturday afternoon.
Yeah. So in '99, it was 2 days. It was Saturday.
Yep.
It was 1 through 3.
Now we know
Sunday
obviously they like the TV primetime slots during the weeknights. But yeah, so I think it was round 1 and 2 on Saturday, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on Sunday.
So you waited a little while on Sunday, but not too long.
I did, but there was something, my agent, and I took so many pre-draft visits because I didn't go to the combine. I went to, I think it was 15 teams.
Wow.
And I got even the mixed reactions from the teams. I mean, there were some teams I remember telling me, hey, there might be a chance we look at you at the end of, Saturday, which would be kind of the end of the second round, right? Yeah. And then there was other teams. I met with the Chicago Bears, and they're like, we're going to give you a call after the draft. We hope you sign with us. So I'm like, they're not even looking at drafting me. I'm like, okay. So I'm hearing anything maybe second round to maybe undrafted free agent. So I honestly had no clue.
You split the uprights.
You're right. So I think, and then, talking with my agent and what he was hearing, I think we felt comfortable that it was going to be probably 3 at the highest, 5 at the latest. And we ended up going right in between, right at the top of the 4th round. And for me, that was, God, there were so many guys that even that year that I got drafted that I just remember my whole attitude was I never really expected to play in the NFL when I was in college. I mean, when I got the first call from an agent, I was like, what are they calling me for? Like, wow, I'm actually might have a shot here, and the whole process, I just remember being just grateful. Hey, wherever I go, I just want a chance to get my foot in the door. I'm going to be thankful. I'm going to work hard, all this. There's so many guys though that are like, they'll go in the second round, right? And it'll be, I'm going to make every team that passed on me pay, like I'm pissed. I should have been here. I should have been there. And that attitude from it, look, okay, maybe it's a chip that you can carry on your shoulder and use motivation. But for me, it was like, why are you doing that? First of all, your own team that picked you in the 3rd round already passed on you twice too. So you're going to make them pay as well. Right. Like, but I just remember for me, I mean, that whole draft experience was, I never really dove into what, they were writing articles about or talking to you. It was kind of just, hey, my agent was like, this is what's going to happen. Just believe this, trust this, anything else you read, don't buy into it. Right. The guys that have you going, in the end of the 1st round or the 2nd round, probably not going to happen. Don't get your hopes up. You're going to be a mid-round guy. And I think that going in with realistic expectations allowed me to, not be disappointed on where I got selected. And that for me was probably the biggest thing. It allowed me, I believe, to get off to a good start in my career.
So I do want to make sure that we touch on the news of the day. And we're going to eventually get to the best scenarios that you and I both see the Lions having at that number 6 pick in the 1st round of the NFL draft. And a couple of scenarios that could happen and rank them in what we see as the best situation for the Lions all the way through, hey, this is what we think can happen and where the Lions go with that number 6 pick. But the news of the day is obviously Jalen Hurts with a 5-year, $255 million contract,
Massive.
179 of it guaranteed. And there's language in there about, how guaranteed is guaranteed. I don't give a shit. It's 5 years. $255 million on a per year basis. It's the richest NFL contract that we've seen, $51 million per year on average. In regards to how this affects the Lions, because the ripple effects of What happens with Joe Burrow? We know that he'll probably get a little bit more than Jalen Hurts. For Justin Herbert, probably a little bit less. Lamar Jackson, he's going to fall if he ever decides to, accept the contract, sign a contract, come down in his demands of guarantee, and we don't really even know what those are. It'll be probably less than Jalen Hurts. So it's a benchmark. But in regards to the Detroit Lions, Jared Goff has 2 years left on his contract. Are you in the camp that says, hey, it's cheaper to extend him now because the bar is only going to continue to go up. The salary cap's going to go up. If you extend him now, if you get him for $45 million a year, then it's more than what you're seeing, out of New York. And I forget the guy's name. Who's the quarterback in New York?
Daniel Jones.
Yeah, Daniel Jones. So he's at 40 a year.
Yeah.
I think Jared Goff's a better quarterback than Daniel Jones. So it's probably more than him, obviously less than those guys that I just mentioned. If you sign him to an extension now, you're probably looking somewhere in the range of $43 to $45 million a year. Do you do it now, or do you let him play out this year? And on the high end, hey, he takes them to the NFC Championship game, maybe wins a playoff game. The number's only going to go up. Are you willing to gamble that, maybe he just does the same thing and they get there, but they get there despite or in spite of Jared Goff? Because we've talked about, at the end of the game, do you want him being the one making the throw? Where are you on regards to extending Jared Goff? Where are you in regards to, if you want to, do you do it now or do you wait for another year?
Yeah, I would wait if it was me, because I think that Jared Goff still has a lot to prove. I think even the last 2 seasons we've seen
the best of, we've seen
good halves at times. We've seen, him string together a couple games in a row at a time. Just remember 2 years ago, right? The first 9 games were atrocious, right? The last, I think it was 6 games, 3-2-1, whatever it may have been, or 3-3, right? Hey, second half of the season played pretty well. Last year, kind of the same thing, right? First half of the season, not a good football team, right? We all knew they were 3-6 and looked pretty dead, right? Second half of the season, guy looked pretty good, man. Like, all right, guy you can win with. I need to see a full season of him doing that. And I need to see a full season of him showing that he can be the guy that can lead you to good things and win through adversity, right? Not just be a good quarterback when everything's going well, when you're running the ball for 180 yards, when your defense is playing well. Every quarterback can play well in that situation, and Jared Goff has. It's the games on the line. We need you to make a big throw, right? And something outside of the scheme, something outside of the play call, right? Because people bring up the Jets. Well, yeah, they needed it was a 3-yard over route to an open tight end. Hey, look, he made the play. Give him props for that. But that's not a play you look at and say, Jared Goff stepped up and made a play when it counted. I need to see more of that before I decide if he's a guy I want to pay $45 million a year to. I think that this system, and we talked about it, a couple weeks ago, I think it is a quarterback-friendly system. I don't think that you need a quarterback in this system to pay $48 million a year to have success, right? I look at it as trying to build it the same way that San Francisco is trying to build their team, right? Obviously, hey, good O-line, good D-line, good defense, right? Running the ball, play action pass, all that good shit. Is San Francisco a team that needs a $45 million quarterback?
They haven't won
no,
Super Bowl.
they proved. I know they had injuries last year, and I still don't think they probably would have won that game in Philly, even if they didn't have 2 guys go down. But you kind of get my point. Like, and sure, if you want to say, they didn't win the Super Bowl, I get all that, but they showed you could still have tremendous amount of success with a great team around a guy that is in a quarterback-friendly system.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm kind of on pause. I still want to see, what they do in the draft. I'm still curious. I still think quarterback is in play for them, whether that's at 6, whether that's at some point, even in the 2nd or 3rd round, if they get a guy that, hey, not just filling a roster spot, but a guy that you genuinely plan on saying, we plan to develop him to take over in, a year or 2. It'll be interesting to see if they go that way. And it'll be interesting to see how the board falls as well. I think, look, next Thursday night, I think there's a lot of us that are going to probably feel like we got duped, right? Because we've been so tuned the last 2 months as to, first 4 or 5 picks, quarterback. Like, I don't know if that's going to happen, right? I think obviously we know what Carolina's going to do at 1. I think it's Bryce Young. And I think all the odds and, he canceled all his visits. I think he's probably got assurance he's going to be a Carolina Panther. But after that, I mean, there's reports now that Houston, they're open to moving out of the number 2 pick, and they're not even sure if, they think there's or CJ Stroud or Levis or any of those guys are going to be franchise quarter. So I say that sitting here, there might be a chance at 6 that there might be a quarterback on the board that Brad Holmes loves. Now, if he takes a quarterback, I think that'll be the first move that he's made in the last 3 years that people are going to question. But for me, that would let me know this team is planning for the future. They're not planning for just this year. We got to win the division this year. We got to make a run this year, right? This is about building the next 4, 5, 6 years. And I think ultimately what Brad Holmes is going to be judged on when we look back at his tenure is what he did at the quarterback position, right? And I just feel right now, if you extend Jared Goff and if Jared Goff's your quarterback for the next 4 or 5 years, I feel like that's going to handicap your team and that's going to lower your ceiling as opposed to bringing in a young guy, having that true 3, 4, 5 year window of having a cheap quarterback and being able to build a dynamic team around him.
How do you get that young guy?
Well, it's hard. I mean, it's hard. It's not easy. I know it's hard. I know it's difficult. And I know it's like even Brad Holmes said, it's way easier to get worse at quarterback than it is better. I mean, you have to be right. You have to be right. And I think, listen, if they take a quarterback at 6, or Brad Holmes has shown, hey, he got that pick from the Rams last year. It turned out to be the worst possible pick it could be at 32, but he parlayed that into a better pick, right? He said, we're trading up to get our guy Jameson Williams at 12. I don't know if he's going to think the same way at 6, saying, hey, this is a free pick. This is the Rams pick. Let's take that. Let's take another pick. Let's move up at 3. And if he takes a quarterback, look, I think it would be a hell of a discussion to be had for us fans. But you know what Brad Holmes has earned? I think he's earned our trust.
Yeah.
Because he has been pretty damn right. I mean, you look at Penei Sewell, everybody in town was on board with that. Aiden Hutchinson, everybody on board with that. Jameson Williams, everybody you know what I mean? So that would be the first pick where people would be like, okay, maybe hit the brakes a little bit, maybe pause to think about what they're doing. But for me, I trust Brad Holmes. And if if that's the route that they go, I mean, who am I to say that they're wrong?
Okay. So you brought up obviously that number 6 pick. We've been talking about it now since the season ended. Give me the 2 best, let's go 3 scenarios, and not just the best ones, but 3. How do you see the first round playing out
for the Lions?
Up until not let's ignore pick 18 this week. We can talk about that next week. But that 6 overall pick, how does it play out for the Detroit Lions?
Okay, so I think if we're going 3 scenarios here, 1 being the best, 3 being the worst, I think 3 for me would be corner. I think that would be just kind of a boring pick, a position that's like, okay, I know you just signed a bunch of guys. And hey, I also get that with Mosley and with CJ Gardner-Johnson, those guys are only on 1-year deals, right? You're going to have to try to find guys behind them that you can have on 3, 4, 5-year deals. I get that. But for me, it doesn't matter how good your secondary is if you can't get to the passer, right? And I think, hey, Hutchinson, we all loved his development, but that's a much bigger need in my opinion. And if something wacky happens where Carter's off the board, Anderson's off the board, even maybe Wilson's off the board, and you're sitting there at 6 and you're saying, we don't think there's another defensive lineman that's worth this pick, I think you only have one option at that time, and it's not taking a corner. I think you got to find a way to trade down. So I think you got to try to find a way to trade down to 10 to 12. Hey, then I'd be comfortable taking the best corner available, right, in that position. You're probably going to get less than market value for a trade just because who's there at 6 that a team's going to want to jump up and take? I mean, you know what I mean? So that would be worse. That would be worst possible situation for me.
And I agree with you, but here's how I think that plays out. And here's the silver lining of it is you mentioned the trade down. If number 1 overall is Bryce Young, he goes to Carolina. Number 2, we don't know what Houston's going to do. Let's say they take Will Anderson. It's kind of that wild card. We don't know what's going to happen. Number 3, Arizona stays where they're at, and maybe they take Jalen Carter or Tyree Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all of a sudden at 4, Indy's probably going to take CJ Stroud. At 5, whoever's left that Arizona didn't take, whether it's Carter or Wilson, he ends up going at 5. So you got 3 defensive players. and you've got 2 quarterbacks off the board. The Lions are on the board at number 6. I'm with you. I don't think whether it's Devin Witherspoon or Christian Gonzalez, I don't want either of those guys at 6.
Yeah.
However, Vegas picks at 7. I know they just signed Jimmy G, but it doesn't feel like to me that that's a long-term solution. The 2 guys left on the board are from that quarterback position are Anthony Richardson, who's going to take some time to develop. They've got Jimmy G. They could go that route. Will Levis going to take some time to develop. They could, again, go that route because they have a starting quarterback and they want to find whoever is that next guy. If Vegas is looking at possibly taking a quarterback, Tennessee could be in that same situation. Tennessee might want to jump Vegas. Vegas might want to say, hey, I want to move up to 6 simply because I don't want anybody else to jump me. You've been able
the remaining quarterback. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if those 2 guys are there, that is, and I'm not saying it's a great silver lining, it's your only chance at a silver lining that somebody wants one of those quarterbacks. They're willing to jump up to 6. And now if you're only moving down to 7, again, it's not great positional value with Gonzalez, but at least you're getting something more in return. You're going to get another pick. Maybe it's a 5th round pick. You get into the 5th round. Maybe it's a 3rd round pick. Who knows what the bidding war could be at that time, but that's your option. Or you trade down to 11. Obviously, you'll get more in return because you're trading out of the top 10.
Yeah.
But that's what happens if the worst case scenario is 3 defensive linemen are off the board, only 2 quarterbacks, the Lions are on the clock, and on your best player available, it's a corner.
Yeah. Or even, if 3 quarterbacks go, let's say, Anderson and Wilson go and Jalen Carter sitting there.
And you don't want
and you didn't have a good interview with him when he was in the building Monday, and you just don't feel good about him fitting in with the foundation that you've built of young players. Now you're hoping that maybe a team at 9, the Bears, maybe a team at 10, like Philly, absolutely loves the guy. I think they can bring him in and, change whatever character issues he might have. That might be best because now you're going to, hey, you want to come get Jalen Carter? And we know he's got the character issues, but now you're going to pay for that pick, right? Because that still would be a premium player as far as football player is concerned. That, to me, would be a situation that if you see that, I mean, if they don't take Jalen Carter, that's going to let you know how that visit went on Monday, right? But for me, just, the second best situation, I think, would be everything played out great Monday. With Jalen Carter came in on his visit. They probably spent countless hours getting to know each other. As his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, said, it hasn't been easy for teams to, kind of understand who he is and what the issues are that he has, but they're trying to educate these teams on exactly who he is. And maybe Brad Holmes and maybe Dan Campbell say, you know what, we've got the right leaders in place. We trust in Dan Campbell to be a guy that holds players accountable. And we think that, Jalen Carter can come in and learn from the already existing players on how to be a true professional. That, for me, would be probably my second scenario that I would love, because I love the football player Jalen Carter. I absolutely love him. He is dominant, and he fits, in my opinion, the biggest need still left around this team, and that's having a dominant interior defensive line player, not just for first, second down or just for third down, but for all 3 downs. That's a guy that can do it every facet of the game. I love the football player. That, for me, would be my second scenario, that if they take Jalen Carter, you know what, that'll answer a lot of questions about the character issues, saying, you know what, I trust Brad Holmes, I trust Dan Campbell. They think that they can get him in the right spot, help the kid out to become hopefully a premier defensive tackle in this league.
So I think if it went well on Monday, Jalen Carter falls to them at number 6. We're in agreement with what is the second best option. Now, where I'm really curious is, what do you think is the best option? And I'll start with this. Best option is Will Anderson falls to him at 6. And that's what Mel Kiper in his last
wet dream cup last week, didn't he?
I don't think there's any. It's like zero reality.
It was like he did the mock draft pretending he was Brad Holmes.
Right.
Like, which players do I
Brad
want
Holmes
to
with
fall
a
to
heart
me at every
on?
pick? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Which was a bit of a wet dream. I don't think he's going to be there at 6, but I'm with you. I think my favorite scenario would be, and look, we talked about it too, Brad Holmes is not afraid to move around in the draft to get a player that he loves. if he loves Will Anderson, like we all do, if he thinks Will Anderson is going to become a perennial, all Pro Bowl type of guy, that we certainly think he's got that ability. He would have been the first pick in last year's draft, right? He probably should have been in New York for the Heisman ceremony last year, either, okay, I'm not going to get into that, alongside Aiden Hutchinson, right? You could have potentially the two of the best pass rushing defensive ends in all of college football over the last 2 years. That to me would be a dream scenario. I don't think it's going to happen at 6. I think you're going to have to move up to get him. If a team like Houston or a team like Arizona wants to trade, you're going to have to give up a lot. You're probably going to have to give up that 18 pick, right, John?
Yeah, you're going to have
probably going to have to do that. So now you're saying, okay, I'm surrendering my 18th pick, basically saying I'm surrendering my chance to get probably another day one starter there at that spot, but we're going out and we're getting what we feel is the best player in the draft. And that to me would be an absolute dream scenario. I would love to take care of the bookend defensive ends and not have to worry about that spot for the next, hopefully, 8, 9, 10 years with Will Anderson and Aiden Hutchinson.
Well, it'd be really cool if they were able to move up, if Mel Kiper's prophecy comes true and he falls to him at 6. I think that is the number one scenario. Is you come away with the draft in the first round, no matter how it pans out with Will Anderson. Number one scenario, best option for the Detroit Lions. Number 2 is Monday went well. The in-person visit with Jalen Carter, he falls to him at 6. You don't have to do anything to move up. You still keep your 18th pick, and you take Jalen Carter with the confidence knowing he's going to be not just the game changer on the field, but he's going to do what it takes off the field to make sure that he's available on Sundays. And number 3 is you end up with that number 6 pick. 3 defensive players are off the board, and you're sitting there having to take a corner. And I think in terms of that, the best case scenario is that Jalen Carter and 1 quarterback is still available, because now a team says, hey, there's only one of those guys available.
Yeah.
We've got to jump up and get him. Or, hey, the visit for us and Jalen Carter went well. Maybe it went well for the Raiders. Maybe it went well for somebody else. We need to jump up and make sure we get him. Trading down, I don't really want to go outside the top 10. 11 would be as far as I would want to go, depending on what I get in return. But I think those are your 3 best scenarios.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And, man, it feels like we've been talking about the draft for months, which I know we have.
Because it's reality.
We only got, 9 more days to wait? I mean, this is going to be – and like we said, I said this probably right after – I think our first podcast after the regular season was over. I think that this is going to be the most important offseason for Brad Holmes, right? And I think, obviously everybody's agreed with what they did in free agency, going out and helping the secondary, getting 3 guys that can come in and not just provide depth, but be starters for you, which was a weakness of this team. But how he's going to address this draft, right? Because, look, if this team does what we think they're going to do over the next couple years, they're not going to be picking 6 again, right? So this is one to me that, hey, this is a chance to absolutely cement the foundation of this team for years to come. And I think this is going to be the offseason that we look back on hopefully 10 years from now and say, that was the draft, that was the offseason that really changed the dynamic of this team.
Yeah, and that offseason is the continued development of last year's draftable players or drafted players, as well as what they're doing in free agency, addressing the defensive back position, and then the draft. I think you're right. This is year 3 of Brad Holmes. You look at the GM Power Rankings. This one came out earlier, and I forget who the author was. Brad Holmes in only year 2 was, in terms of GM Power Rankings, was ranked number 7 in the NFL, which you could see why, for what he was able to do in free agency this year, what he was able to do in the draft in the first couple of years, building this football team from basically scratch, and getting them to 9-7 last year. Some of that's, Dan Campbell, some of that's Brad Holmes, but you got to have the players on the field, and you acquire those through the draft. You acquire the depth of your roster through the draft, and you piece together some parts and components in free agency to add to it, but it's got to be through the draft. So Next week is the NFL draft. We will give you our final thoughts leading up to the draft. And we can't wait to see what the Lions do on Thursday night, April the 27th, what they do Friday and Saturday to fill out the roster. And then we'll be off and running through the rest of the offseason. So stay tuned for all your Lions information right here on Necessary Roughness.